Good evening. So, my name is Ram Sudhir. Okay. Okay. Some students know me. Okay. Okay. Fine. Fine. So today we'll be doing the chapter 4 and some areas of chapter 5. Okay. So. Okay. So this is the topic: monetary management and financial intermediation, a good year. Okay, so here the word, okay, that means many things are positive. So it indicates the word itself. When you read the topic, it says a good year. It means many things look positive. So what are the things which are looking positive? What are the things which are slightly negative? Okay, what are the trends? What are the trends with respect to, and what are the new terms and terminologies which have come up in the economic survey? Listen very carefully. Which may crop up in the prelims. So this should be our approach. So mainly, few things we can use it for mains, very limited areas. I'll show you where it is relevant as far as mains is concerned. And when it comes to prelims, what are the areas where there can be questions? I think you're getting my point. So any new terminology that comes up, they may ask a simple question. For example, I'll show you some previous questions also. For example, before last year, there was a question on interest coverage ratios. Okay, interest coverage ratio. Okay, interest coverage ratio. It was there was a question asked. I'll show you the questions later. And there was also a question related to incremental capital output ratio. Incremental capital out. These are words. These are some words which keep coming in the economic survey. Without doing the economic survey also, if you know the concept, you can mark the answer. Okay, but if you are doing the economic survey, one other additional advantage should be, what is the trend with respect to that particular aspect? This is what you have to understand. For example, we would have learnt about like capital adequacy ratio. Capital adequacy ratio. Okay, so this capital adequacy ratio, again in the economic survey, this term keeps coming, capital adequacy ratio. Or there is this term called as provisional coverage ratio with respect to banking. Provisional coverage ratio with respect to banking. So here we will also find out like how it is doing. And one important observation is 90%, if you don't know also, it should be positively doing. Therefore, I want to get my point. If you're guessing also something in the exam, you don't know. But 90% you should not be guessing when you're doing the economic survey. If not done the economic survey, probably you want to guess something. Then obviously, since he's saying a good year, that means with respect to most of the aspects, India has improved, or India is doing far better than many other countries, including the stock markets. When you see this particular topic in detail, including the stock markets, the whole globe was not doing well, India was doing well. When it comes to inflation, India is doing far better than many. So this is what is observation. So first thing is your observation. What are the things we have to observe? I'll just make a list. Is this clear? Okay. So first is, one is an aspect related to inflation. Of course, this is a separate topic we will do. The chapter 5 is this only. So how is India doing with respect to this? How is the globe doing with respect to this? And the economic survey, what it comments on this particular area called as inflation. Okay, so this is how you have to think about the prelim area. Okay, so that is one is inflation. Second important aspect is, there was something like monetary tightening, which was done across the globe. Monetary tightening, which is done across the globe. Why it was done, etc. What is monetary tightening? That means there can be a question on monetary tightening. Which of the following indicate monetary tightening? And as part of monetary tightening, okay, so there is a word which comes up in the economic survey, which is something called as a standing deposit facility. Standing deposit facility. So that's a word. So that word can come up in the exam. What is the standing deposit facility? Or how is it little different from the reverse repo rates? I think you're getting my point, right? Okay, so this is standing deposit facility. So there's no point in, one is we'll observe, we'll look into the detailed observation of the survey, but at the same time, which is more important for the exam, once we have an idea, then we can stress more there. Okay, so then comes up something like, now in this particular economic survey, they also talk about something like the hawkish policy or the hawkish stand. Okay, hawkish, this comes up. So this is again related to the monetary tightening. This is again related to what? Monetary tightening. Hawkish is basically, okay, you're very intelligent. So tell me, what is hawkish? Yeah. Contractionary? Huh. Reducing the liquidity, listen very carefully, let me speak. Reducing the liquidity or provisioning of liquidity, though it may affect growth. Though it may affect growth. Are you able to get this? Provisioning of liquidity, though it may affect growth. This is what is hawkish. Are you able to get this? Okay. Now the question comes up, is India following a similar hawkish policy? Or is India a little different from the hawkish policy which is followed across the globe? How is India a little different from the hawkish policy which is followed across the globe? So here we talk about our stand. We in the RBI has clearly mentioned that we are going to remove something like slowly from accommodative to pulling back of accommodative stand. Okay, pulling back of accommodative stand. Pulling back of accommodative stand. You're slowly pulling back the accommodative stand. Heard of the word accommodative? So you're pulling back the accommodative stand, and at the same time, we will also keep growth in mind. We'll also keep growth in mind. Now, this is India's stand now. We'll also keep growth in mind. Accommodative, there is neutral, there is calibrated tightening. Heard of these words? Okay, so accommodative is easy money policy. Easy, cheap money policy. Or basically your complete focus is on growth, but it can lead to inflation, isn't it? Okay. Neutral, you'll take a stand based on the circumstance. You will either reduce the repo or you will increase the repo based on the circumstance. That is neutral. Okay. Calibrated tightening, the word tightening itself says you're tightening the policy. You're reducing the money supply. You're reducing the money supply. Are you able to get this? Okay. So hawkish is also kind of calibration only. Calibrated, you're reducing the money supply in the economy. But at the same time, when you're reducing the money supply, you know that the growth may get affected, and still you're going ahead with something like the reduction of the liquidity. That is what is hawkish. But India is saying accommodative, moving from slowly pulling back the accommodative. Accommodative is what? Easy money. Pulling back, but at the same time, we will keep what in mind? Growth in mind. This is our stand. Are you able to get this? There's a slight difference. So growth in mind, though growth getting affected. Is that clear? Okay. So these are some words. I'll anyhow, we need to be a little fast here. So is this clear? Okay. So then moving forward, the whole globe was talking about like the banks are going down. Banking system. Okay. So yesterday also you would have read some news with respect to additional tier 1 bonds. Okay, so there was this additional tier 1 bonds being written off, etc. Now, the European countries, whenever there is a recession in 2008 also, you will observe that the banking system was not doing well. Okay, now also the observation is, you find that the banking system of India is very, very strong. Economic survey clearly points out this aspect. Economic survey says, India, your capital adequacy ratio is almost 16%. 16%. Economic survey is saying capital adequacy ratio is 16, which talks about resilient banking, very strong banking fundamentals. And even Bessel has appreciated India. Bessel has appreciated India that you're doing far better than what Bessel was saying. So India has to maintain something like, according to RBI, 9% it should be there, plus a capital conservation buffer of 2.5. That means it should be 11.5%. Are you able to get this? Okay, so but we are somewhere around how much? 16. Is it clear? So this clearly shows banking system is really doing well. So that means there can be a question related to this. Already UPSC has asked a prelims question on this, capital adequacy ratio. Here, probably conceptual question was already asked. Maybe a trend question is India's capital adequacy ratio in the last 1 year is improving. Yes, definitely it is improving. You are far better than what you have targeted. In fact, what you have targeted is more than what Bessel has mentioned. Bessel was talking 8 plus 2.5. I have not included capital conservation buffer. I have not included capital conservation. So I have not included counter-cyclical buffer. Okay, 8 plus 2.5 is, this 2.5 is the capital conservation buffer. This is counter-cyclical buffer. I have not included the counter-cyclical buffer. I talk about it. If there is a doubt, then I will explain. If you are okay with the concept, I'll move forward. What? I'll come there. This is only we are jotting down. Huh? Don't worry. Till here is it clear? Okay, so then moving forward. Now, the whole globe you will find NPA is not doing well, but India's case, even our asset quality has increased. Now, this is a very clear indicator in the economic survey. Good year. Good. Okay, so asset quality has increased. NPAs have reduced. Gross NPAs have almost reduced to 5.1%. Okay, gross NPAs, 5 point. That means it's a very positive thing that when after COVID, you observe that NPAs have come down, and economic survey clearly mentions about insolvency and bankruptcy codes efficiency. It talks about the efficiency of IBC. Okay, efficiency of IBC. It says both the gross NPAs as well as the net NPAs. The net NPAs. Net NPAs is almost like 1.3, 1.4. Net NPAs have almost decreased. Okay, so this shows a resilient banking system. Very important aspect. So that means NPA, there can be a question. If at all there is a question on NPA, what can be the question from economic survey? I think you're getting my point, right? Okay, economic survey, it shows, the graph shows that NPAs have reduced. Okay, NPAs have reduced for India. The graph clearly shows NPAs have reduced to almost like 5.1, gross NPA. Then probably we should know the difference between gross and net NPA. It's a very simple thing, we'll see. Okay, then the provisioning coverage ratio, when we talk about these ratios, okay, that is the amount which you are keeping aside. The amount which you are keeping aside for bad loans. Are you able to get this? The banks have to keep some amount aside for bad loans. Now the economic survey again talks about this ratio is improving. This ratio is positive. This ratio is improving. So on one side, your asset quality is improving. NPA is going down means what? Asset quality is improving. And on the other side, your provisioning is improving. It is a very positive thing. Provisioning is improving on one side and NPAs are going down on the other side. So both these two things put together, it's a very positive thing for the banking system, along with the capital adequacy ratios of how much? 16%. It clearly shows our banking system is doing fantastic, according to the economic survey. I think you're getting my point. Is this clear? Okay. So then, the economic survey also talks about not just the banks, it also talks about NBFCs, non-banking financial companies. Okay, so that means there is a specific mention of NBFCs and which sector NBFC gives maximum amount of loan, etc. Okay, so for example, NBFC's maximum loans are going to industry, not to agriculture. Okay, so industry is and you will find that NBFCs also, their capital adequacy ratios are also doing well. So most of the NBFCs have to maintain the capital adequacy ratio of, let's say, 15, and you will find on an average they are maintaining around 27. So NBFCs also, IL and FS crisis earlier has created some problem with respect to NBFCs. The big NBFCs, we call them as the systematically important non-deposit taking NBFCs. The big NBFCs which have collapsed. Systematically important banks or systematically important NBFCs are very important, and that was clearly mentioned in the Basel III norms. Basel III. One is the basic, then is the extension. I think till here it is clear. So again, NBFC says NBFCs are also doing well. And one more important observation, very important observation and a good thing. Good thing is, if you observe 2019-20, okay, and again 21-22 and 22-23, we observe that investment as a percentage of GDP, investment, okay, it was around 30%. Now this investment as a percentage of GDP is going to almost like 34%. It means a 4% increase. Now, when there is a problem, when there's a problem like COVID, when there's a problem like the war which is happening, when there is monetary tightening, okay, so loans are not cheap now, loans are costly. Monetary tightening on one side, war on the other side, okay, investments have to reduce. Across the globe, investments have come down, inflation on a higher side, loan interest rates on a higher side, and still India shows some promising aspect with respect to its investment. Are you able to get this? Now, this is a positive thing again. Investment as a percentage of GDP, if it is increasing by 4 also, it is a decent achievement in the present conditions. What are the present conditions? I'll talk about the present conditions. Is that okay? You're able to follow? No confusion till here. Right, very good. Okay, so let's move forward. Now here, so the NBFCs, situation of NBFCs I'll discuss when I'll show you the slides that time. And along with that, this aspect of investment, there is an improvement along with the bank, along with the NBFCs. Now, another important area is this aspect which is clearly mentioned, bond yields. Okay. Now, in this chapter, there is a discussion about bond yields. Now, obviously, when monetary tightening is happening, inflation is on the higher side. Okay, what would have happened with respect to bond yields? Decrease, increase? Very, very difficult question. The question is, inflation is increasing. Monetary tightening. So, across the globe, monetary tightening, right? That means what would have happened to the interest rates in US? Increased. Okay. Interest rates in US have increased. So, what interest rate or the coupon rates basically when it comes to bonds? So, bond yields across the globe would have. Okay. No. I understood. Okay, I'll come to that. How will it fall? Now the question is, see, during COVID, what did governments do? Through their fiscal policy and monetary policy is they started pushing money. Yes or no? Okay, so that means easy money was available. So money started moving into the hands of public. Okay, or even companies. So companies will start buying what? Bonds or whatever it is. They have money, they can buy bonds. Okay, so that means demand for bonds during that point of time would have increased. Demand for bonds would have increased. That means demand for the bond is increasing means what would have happened with respect to bond prices? Increase, no, demand, don't make a mistake here. No, demand is increasing means obviously the price of the bond would have increased. Now, after COVID is over, you felt that COVID is gone. Now you wanted to handle, now because of that excess liquidity you pushed in, now you also suffer with respect to inflation. So because inflation is there, not only India, across the globe, in US also it touched 9%, whatever it is. Now you want to pull back the money which you have injected. So now that is the reason you want to use SDFs, standing deposit facility, or whatever it is. Okay, so that time we have used long-term repo operations, targeted repo operations, all that to push liquidity. Now you want to pull it back, and therefore you decided that monetary tightening. Okay, so from last year, March 2022 to Feb 2023, the repo rates were almost increased from 4% to 6.5%. Okay, so till Feb 2023, it is almost like 250 basis points. This is what is monetary tightening, no? Repo rate have been increased, CRR was increased by 50 basis points. You came up with SDF, standing deposit facility. I'll talk about SDF later. Okay, so SDF, and you have tightened. So now you don't have cash. Suppose you don't have cash, what you will do? You want to sell your bonds. So people started selling bonds. Companies started selling bonds. You are selling something, okay, at a faster pace. What will happen to the prices? Prices will fall. No, you're selling off. You're selling on a mass scale. You're selling something. You're selling bonds. Okay, so shares if you're selling off. Okay, so that similarly, bonds you're selling off. That means the bond prices are going to fall. If bond prices are going to decrease, what is the relationship between bond price and yield? Inverse relation. So that means if the bond prices would have fallen, then whatever would have happened with respect to bond yield? Increased. Okay, understood. So that means the economic survey says obviously the bond yields would have increased. Yes, understood now? Okay, and it is directly linked to oil prices. Whenever oil prices are increasing, bond yields are also increasing. When oil prices are decreasing, bond yields are also decreasing. So this is a clear-cut indication that is given in the economic survey. There is a graph for that. I've pasted the graph also. Is that okay? Understood, no? Okay, so this is the first area. No, still it is not over. This is the first area. Once you have understood this, now we'll get back to our... This is the first part. I have written some eight areas there, or 8 points you can say. And now once we observe, we'll understand very easily. Okay, there should not be any problem. Okay. Now see here. Okay. So the year 2022 marked the return of high inflation, especially in the advanced economies. Now one observation is, what is our inflation target? So our inflation target, we all know, CPI combined is how much? You have to maintain it between 4 plus or minus 2 consumer price index. Okay, so that means up till 6 is okay for us. Okay, so initially the inflation rates went up to more than 7.8. And I think currently, if you observe it, have come down to 6.4. And by December 2022, we have also reduced it to almost 5.4. Reduced it. Okay, so in comparison to developed world, okay, India was okay. For example, if India is having an inflation rate of 5% or 5.5%, it is okay for India. But the advanced economies, the economic survey says the advanced economies, if they have this rate of inflation, it is difficult for them to handle. Are you able to get this point? India is a growing economy. In a growing economy, 5 to 5.5% of inflation is pretty decent. But in an advanced economy, their inflation bearing capacity is not so high. This is what the economic survey says. And therefore, this 5.5% is decent for India. Or if India's inflation is around 7 also, it is as if like 1% more than our maximum bearing capacity. But advanced economies like US, they have touched inflation rates of 9%. 9%, if their bearing capacity is hardly 5, that means they are going to face bigger problems than India. So India is in a better position in comparison to the advanced world with respect to inflation. So one important macroeconomic indicator, that is inflation also, India is doing far better than many countries. And that is the reason investors may think India as a destination now. So when we talk about the gift city, okay, so when we talk about, suppose there are some foreign entities, or NRIs who want to come and invest also. It's a very good platform for them. They can come and invest. Now they will observe macroeconomic indicators in India. Macroeconomic indicators means what is the growth? What is the current account deficit? If suppose our current account deficit is 4%, etc. What is our inflation? Inflation, even during the pandemic, just after pandemic, if you see 7, 6.5, it is far better than many, if you make a comparison. Okay, so based on these factors, even FD is what? Fiscal deficit. Are you able to get this? Our fiscal deficit target in the budget? 5.9. Okay, so 9.2 during pandemic spending, 9.2, 5.2, 5.9 means a decent level of decrease which we can observe. So even the macroeconomic indicators like FD, okay, or current account deficit, including inflation, India is far better than many. Very positive. So I can take a stand that yes, invest in India. Yes or no? Yes. Okay, so I think it is clear. Now see, these developments led to an unprecedented synchronous and sharp cycle of monetary tightening. So economic survey says all the countries together have increased their interest rates, or all the countries together have gone ahead with monetary tightening. All the countries together across the globe have increased their interest rates or reduced the money supply. This is what they have done. Okay. The RBI initiated its monetary tightening cycle, thereby moderating surplus liquidity in the market. Which was reflected in the lower growth of monetary aggregates. Okay, so monetary tightening will definitely should have a negative impact on money supply. monetary tightening should have a negative impact on money supply. Are you able to get this? Okay. Or monetary tightening should have a negative impact on these monetary aggregates like M1, M2, M3, M4. Are you able to get this? Okay, so if there is a problem, I will explain the concept. If you know the concept, we'll move forward. That's how we'll do. Okay, so monetary aggregates, basically we talk about these monetary aggregates like M1, M2, M3, M4. They should get affected, obviously. Okay, or the broad money also should have got affected. The growth rate should have got affected because of monetary tightening that was done by RBI. This is what is the meaning there. Okay, so that means if RBI is increasing the CRR or the cash reserve ratios, RBI has increased it by 50 basis points. These reserve ratios, or we call them as the legal reserve ratios, LRR, legal reserve ratios. Okay, so if you increase these legal reserve ratios, it should have a negative effect on the money multiplier. It should have a negative effect on money multiplier. Are you able to get this? Okay, so why? It reduces banks' lending capacity, or money multiplier is nothing but 1 divided by the legal reserve ratios. 1 divided by the legal reserve ratio. Is that clear? Okay, so that means a bank using a limited amount of deposits can create huge amount of money. Okay, so through this multiplication effect, for example, suppose the initial deposit that has entered the bank is 1,000, and let's say the legal reserve ratio is around 20%. That is both SLR, CRR put together. It means something like 200 rupees is going into the reserve. I think you're getting my point, right? 200 rupees is going into the reserve. Okay, so the loan availability will be how much here in this case? 800. Now again, this 800 will enter the banking system only. Okay, loan is also, it is entering into the banking system. From this 800, around 160 only, no? Yeah, 160 is going into the reserve. So around 640 is going to come into the loan format. Now this 640 is entering into the banking system in the form of deposit. So here 20% means around 128 will get into the reserve. Now this cycle keeps on continuing till this 1,000 rupees completely goes into the reserve. Are you able to get this? If this 1,000 has to go into the reserve, that means here if you observe, this is 5,000. If this is 5,000, then 20% of 5,000 is how much? 1,000. So loan would be how much? 4,000. So the cycle stops here. So that means with this 1,000 rupees, the multiplier effect is how many times? 5 times. Multiplier effect is how many times? 5 times. Now currently also, remember the economic survey says, your multiplier effect remains almost unchanged. Multiplier effect remains unchanged around 5.1, 5.2. Are you able to get this? This is what economic survey says. So this is if you're saying multiplier effect has reduced, no, multiplier effect remained almost constant around 5.1, 5.2. So, are you able to get this? So, if this becomes, instead of 20, if I make it 25, then 1 by 25%. So, that means instead of 5,000, it will become only 4,000. Are you able to get this? No, yes, what? We have to be fast. This is not a basics class, no. Okay, so 1 by LRR means 1 by 20. Here I did 1 by 25. 1 by 25 is 4. 4 times. 4 into 1,000, 4,000. Is that okay? Okay, so what economic survey says is the multiplier, whether it is 1 by LRR or M3 by M0. M3 by M0 is how money multiplier effect is measured, and this money multiplier effect remains almost unchanged. This is what is the survey saying, unchanged. So one is you should know what is the money multiplier effect. If there is a doubt on these aggregates, I will discuss after some time. Okay, if there is no doubt, we'll move forward. Chalo. Is that clear? So RBI initiated its monetary tightening cycle, thereby moderating surplus liquidity in the market. and which was reflected in the lower growth of monetary aggregates. Monetary aggregates are the measures of money supply. So in the slide, what I did is after the area is over, that particular word I've explained so that you'll read for your reference. So measures of money supply, they capture the total stock of all types of money such as currency and demand deposits held with the public as well as with the banks. Okay. Then RBI categorizes money into 4 broad categories, M1, M2, M3 and M4. And I think you should be knowing, liquidity wise, M1 is the most liquid, and M4 is the least liquid. Okay, and the total liabilities of RBI, if I say the total liabilities of RBI, the total liabilities of RBI is nothing but your base money, that is M0. M0. It is also called as the high powered money. Is that clear? Okay, so okay, is this clear till there? Now, what the economic survey says is, there was an appropriate monetary policy transmission that is clearly visible in the economic survey. That is, in the last year, monetary policy transmission was appropriate in terms of increase in both lending as well as deposit rates. In terms of increase in both lending and deposit rates. Lending as well as deposit rates. That means from March till Feb, March 2022 till Feb 2023, okay, so repo rates were increased from 4 to 6.5%, which is almost like 250 basis points. Almost like 250 basis points. Okay, so obviously interest rates have to increase. So lending interest rates as well as deposit interest rates both have increased. It is talking about, it indicates something like monetary policy transmission. What is monetary policy transmission? The monetary policy is getting transmitted into bank's policy. As simple as that. Monetary policy of the bank, monetary policy of RBI is getting transmitted into bank's interest rate policy. Okay, so earlier for ensuring monetary policy transmission, if you remember, benchmark prime lending rates were replaced and they came up with the concept of base rate in 2010, and from there they have come up with something like the MCLR, marginal cost of fund lending rate, in 2016, and after 2018 they have come up with something called as the external benchmarking. Now currently you are linking it with the repo rates. Okay, so what economic survey says is, the whole target of RBI is basically with respect to the weighted average call rates. Now this is a word. Weighted average call rates should be in line with the repo. Weighted average call rate should be in line with the repo. Now this is some word. So my operational target of RBI will be the WACR. This is a graph which talks about this, WACR, weighted average call rate. So first of all, call rate, what is a call rate? Interbank borrowing. It is a short-term, one-day. Monetary, it is something like a part of a money market instrument. Money market instrument. Okay. Now the whole logic is, this weighted average call rate should be very close to repo. Very close to repo. This is the operational target. So what is that? What is the meaning of very close to repo? So here what you should understand is, let's say if repo is 6.5. Is that clear? Repo is 6.5. Weighted average call rate is something like 6.75. It is above repo. Above repo. Okay. That means it is above repo, means now RBI will follow liquidity infusion. Are you able to get my point now? Now this is something like, listen very carefully. Now the weighted average call rates are above the repo rate. Okay, so it means you want to bring it very close to repo. Now let's say it is, let's say 7, little away from the repo. They're borrowing it at 7. Now you want to bring it very close to repo. Means if this, you have to inject more liquidity. You have to inject more liquidity so that this rate will be aligned with repo. Inject liquidity. So that means RBI will decide, we will follow a policy where we will try to infuse liquidity into the economy. Or for example, if this weighted average call rate is, let's say, 5%, less than the repo, less than the repo. It is less than the repo. Okay, now the logic is you have to increase this rate. You have to increase this weighted average call rate, means RBI will decide to reduce liquidity in the economy. Reduce liquidity, money supply should reduce. Money supply should not be easily available so that this rate will increase. Bouncer? No? Okay, you've understood. So this is the operational target. This is the operational target which RBI was keeping. Okay, what is the operational target which RBI was keeping from last year, last 1.5 years is this weighted average call rate. They want to align it with the repo rate. So that means if it goes above the repo, they will decide, let me inject liquidity so that that rate will come in line with the repo. If it is below repo, it is very low, remove the liquidity from the banking system so that it will move very close to the repo. Is that okay? Okay. So, okay. Now see here, monetary transmission refers to this is okay, this is clear. Now global monetary tightening has contributed to dampen global output. Domestic appetite for credit has been on an upswing. This is a very important aspect. What is an important aspect as far as India is concerned? In India, we observe that though in the other countries, because of monetary tightening, their output has reduced. Dampened, their output has reduced means their output, the total output, production, etc. because of loans becoming costly. But India's case, there is, though interest rates have increased, we will observe that the credit percentage to the GDP has increased. That is, the credit has been on an upswing. The credit has increased. This shows a higher economic activity. So this is a very important aspect. That is, monetary tightening increased. Okay, because of which interest rates increased. Okay, obviously some liquidity issues should have been there. Okay, because RBI decided to remove something called as what? Pullback accommodative stand. Okay, they have decided this pullback accommodative stand. Okay, increase CRR, all this they have done like the other countries. All this they have done, but you'll also observe in spite of all that, the credit upswing is there. So credit to GDP or the credit was falling continuously last 3 years, 4 years, means that is wrong. Are you able to get this? It shows a positive aspect with respect to Indian economy. They are very positive with respect to Indian economy. Then only they will take loans. They are taking loans and investing means there is confidence with respect to the business activity. Is that okay? Understood, right? Okay. So lending by scheduled commercial banks have been growing in double digits. Now this is what I was talking about. Along with this, it is accompanied by a clean balance sheet. NPAs have reduced. Clean balance sheet. NPAs have reduced, thereby indicating low burden of NPAs on banks. So when I talk about NPA ratio is measured using a concept called as slippage ratios. NPAs concept, basically if I have to measure the total NPA last year total NPAs to the gross advances to this year's total, if suppose let's say the total NPAs to the total gross advances given by the bank was something like 10% last year. Okay. Now, in the present year, the total NPA to the gross advances has gone down to, let's say, 14%. 14%. It means there is a slippage. There is a slippage of 4%. There is a slippage of 4%. Slippage means you're not doing well. Your NPAs have almost increased by 4%. Are you able to get this? Okay, so if the slippage is higher, Have you followed? Okay, if the slippage is higher, it means NPAs are increasing. If the slippage is higher, it indicates, here what I can say, NPAs have slipped from 10 to 14, or NPAs have slipped by 14%. 4%. NPAs have slipped by 4%. I think you're getting my point, right? Okay, so this is basically called a slippage ratio. So tomorrow you can come up with this word slippage ratio related to something like NPAs. Okay, so it will indicate whether NPAs are decreasing or NPAs are increasing. Is that okay? Understood? Yes. Okay, so here burden on NPA is coming down. Okay, so here it clearly talks about, even economic survey makes a comparison between banks and NBFCs, and it says NBFC is also doing well with respect to capital adequacy ratio, and NBFCs are also doing well with respect to the credit which they have given. That is the total credit which NBFCs were giving. And NBFC's maximum credit, they were giving it to industry, as I have mentioned. So this is one area where a static question can come up. So the basic difference between a bank and a NBFCs. Are you able to get this? Okay, so that is the reason I put this here. So only one question I will ask you. Do NBFCs maintain CRR and SLR? No, NBFCs do not maintain CRR and SLR. Okay, there are two types of NBFCs. No, few are deposit taking, few are non-deposit taking. Non-deposit taking. Is that clear? Okay, so this is something which you will read later. Obviously, NBA's major source of finance is by issuing bonds. They can issue bonds and raise money from the market. Okay, so that is one of the major sources. They issue bonds and raise money, or they can borrow from banks as well. I'll talk about it again when I'm coming to NBFC. Okay, now see here. Gross NPA of scheduled commercial bank has fallen to a 7-year low. Observation made, 7-year low of 5%, while the capital adequacy ratio, okay, remains healthy at 16%, well above the regulatory requirement of 11.5. Is that okay? Now, what kind of question can come up here? One is, see here, there is this thing in news which is called as the additional tier 1 bond. Okay, this is in news. You will not dig deep into this. You will know the word, what is this additional tier 1 bond? What is the purpose for banks? Using this AT1 bond, what can the bank do? Collect funds for what? Who will issue these? Banks are issuing. Bank issues. So what is the benefit for the bank by issuing these bonds? Short term. Liquidity. तो बैंक के लिए फायदा है. अच्छा. Okay. Okay. What he says is, these are some bonds which can be written off. RBI can write it off. Okay. It says it can be written off. That is what he's saying. Okay. So here one thing is, this additional tier 1 bond can be used for raising the tier 1 capital for the bank. Are you able to get this? Is this 81 bond can help in raising the tier 1 capital for the bank? Okay, so when I am using the word capital adequacy ratio, remember, it is nothing but what? The total capital to the risk weighted assets. You okay? Yes. Okay. So it is total capital to the risk-weighted assets. So total capital here is obviously, one is the tier 1 plus another one is the tier 2 capital to the risk-weighted assets. And this has to be 8% according to the Basel norms. Okay, and this has to be 9% according to RBI. Okay, now what is the understanding here? Now this has to be not only maintained by banks, but also NBFCs also have to maintain some other ratio similar to this at a rate of 15%. Now this tier 1 capital, if it is coming down, tier 1 capital, it is coming down. There are conditions, obviously there are some conditions in the Basel norms that at least 6% should be tier 1 capital. And overall, if you include other entities also, like the capital conservation buffer or counter cyclical buffer, tier 1 at least you should have 10.5. 10.5. Okay, but according to Basel, it is how much you have to maintain? 6 tier 1 capital. These conditions are mentioned in the Basel 3. These conditions are mentioned in which guidelines? Basel 3 guidelines. So obviously, when the banks do not have enough capital, what are the ways to infuse capital? Okay, what are the ways? One is through government's budget, government can pump capital. Okay. Or there are methods like the recapitalization bonds. Recapitalization bonds. Earlier they used to issue these. Okay, so this recapitalization bonds were issued so that the tier 1 capital can increase or the overall capital can increase. Okay, so recapitalization means suppose government is there, bank is there. Okay, so government is issuing some bonds, banks are buying these bonds. Okay, and with the same money, suppose government is buying some equity. With the same money, if government is buying some equity in the bank, are you able to follow? Okay, so you are buying equity and government is the owner or government is holding some equity. Tier 1 major entity is common equity capital. Common equity capital. Common equity capital is one of the major entity. Common equity, basically equity capital. Equity capital, the retained earnings, all this is good capital which is part of the tier 1. Okay, common equity capital. Okay. Now, if you want to raise this tier 1 capital, banks can also issue something like these bonds called AT1 bonds. One more aspect is they can also issue AT1 bonds and raise this capital. Capital is not deposits, it's bank's money. So this tier 1 capital will have equity. Okay, so it has equity. Okay, it has the retained earnings, the profits, which are visible on the balance sheet. These should be visible on the balance sheet. Okay, and these tier 2 capital has preferential shares and subordinate debt, etc. This is not so good capital. That is what you will remember. Not so good. This is good capital. So this common equity capital is a major chunk. Equity, I mentioned equity, and along with that you can also have these additional tier 1, etc. So when banks want to raise, when their banks are short on capital, they can raise the capital through AT1, and you can also be in line with the Basel guidelines, the Basel 3 guidelines, the foreign bank. But these additional tier 1 bonds are risky. They are risky. So in link with that, they can ask, because it is in news, so it is linked to that. It is linked to the capital adequacy. India doesn't have any problem. Our capital adequacy ratios are fantastic, 16%, etc. Okay, so risky, these AT1 bonds are quite risky, highly risky they are. Okay, so along with the risk, why they are risky? One is, suppose these are mainly for the institutions. Institutions buy, not the retail people like us. The values are more. Earlier, the Yes Bank head, there were some problems with Yes Bank. Okay, so they were trying to sell these AT1 bonds also, saying that they are something like the superior FD. Superior FD. FD is what? Fixed deposit. Superior FD. And they wanted to sell it to the retail customers. Retail customers means people like us who do not have knowledge, and you will not even tell them properly that this is a risky venture, risky bond. Okay, you're not giving him all the details and you're selling. That's something where the court had to interfere. Are you able to get this? So in that context also, this AT1 bond was in news. Yesterday also it was in news. So they can ask. So here AT1 bonds are risky. One more thing is, these bonds do not have a prescribed maturity period. No prescribed maturity period. No maturity period, no prescribed. Kind of an eternal, but the bank can call them and they can put the transaction out. But there is no prescribed maturity period that this bond is valid for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. That kind of logic is not there. And interest also can be skipped sometimes by the bank under certain circumstances. Under certain circumstances, interest which the bank is giving, that can also be skipped. Are you able to get this? Interest which the banks are giving can be skipped. Suppose banks feel that their capital is not there, there are some problems, so that interest which they are paying can be skipped for 1 or 2 years. Okay, so like this, there is a risk associated, and it is not for everybody, mainly for the institutional buyers. Okay, and that risk has to be mentioned. So here, what you should understand is, this is one area which you should understand. Common equity capital, tier 1, tier 2, and Basel 3 says, in addition to that, RBI was saying 9%, okay, 9%, plus another 2.5%, come up with 11. This 2.5 is what? This is an additional buffer, capital conservation buffer, additional buffer. Okay. Along with that, come up with counter cyclical buffer. Along with that, come up with counter cyclical buffer. This is another 2.5. Okay, that means according to RBI, 9 plus 2.5, 11.5. This is a standard one they use. This is not counted as a standard. Okay, so if I have to add both, it will be how much? 14. 9 plus 5. Huh? Okay, RBI guidelines. RBI guidelines, it should be 14. But they are saying 11.5. That means they have not included this buffer. Economic survey is talking about 11.5 means they have not included this buffer. That is the counter cyclical buffer. Because this is not constant. Why they have not included this counter-cyclical buffer? Because it is not constant. There is a variation in this. It varies from 0 to 2.5. It can vary. It's a variation. It is not fixed at 2.5. It's a variable concept. You can maintain it at 0 or you can maintain it at a rate of 2.5. This is basically to, if the banks, you're trying to make the banks to lend less at this point. So what is this counter-cyclical? Counter-cyclical is basically you're asking banks to maintain higher capital when the economy is good. You're asking banks to maintain higher capital when the economy is good, so that this capital can be leveraged or used by the banks. When the economy is bad, it can give better loans. So you're demotivating banks from lending during the good period, asking them to maintain more capital during good period, which will help them to lend during the bad situation. So it can vary from 0 to 2.5. And that is the reason economic survey is only talking about 9 plus 2.5, that is 11.5. And with respect to this 11.5, we have something how much? 16. Is that okay? Understood? It can be written off. Bonds can be. If they want, if there is a risk, that is a problem that is happening in Europe. Okay, so if time permits, tomorrow we will see. No, that crisis. Now let's do this. Is this clear till here? Okay. Okay, now see here. Now, good year. The goodness is reflected in the increasing outreach of the banking sector and the capital market is reflected in. So other sectors which are really doing well, which is mentioned here, is one is a stock market. If we observe the stock market compared to other. So when we talk about the volatility index, Indian stocks are less volatile in comparison to the international scenario. So that is what is mentioned. So volatility index can be a term which is mentioned in our material also, in a box. Okay, so in a box it is mentioned in the material. You will observe that this volatility index which is there. Okay, so how is it for Indian entities? Okay, it was less volatile. Risk was less in comparison to the other entities. Another important aspect is the economic survey talks about insurance and pension sector, and they are also doing well. Insurance and pension sector are also doing well. Okay, and the economic survey uses some words which I will talk about after some time, which is called as insurance penetration. Okay, words like insurance penetration, etc., and insurance density. So this insurance penetration and insurance density, which is mentioned in the economic survey, there is a graph. These were increasing. There's an increasing trend. So what is insurance density, if at all he wants to ask? So density is something related to the population only. So density means population. Basically, we talk about population density, no? So insurance density should be something like the premium paid to the total population. I'll come to that. Okay. So here, the global banks reaffirm their hawkish stance. And hawkish stance obviously means they are going to tighten the policy, but at the same time, they know that the growth may get affected. In spite of that, they are going to tighten the policy. Liquidity will be provisioned to control inflation, even if it implies reducing growth. Domestically, however, RBI's support to growth will ensure adequate liquidity in the financial markets. Okay, RBI, though supporting growth, has inflation control as an immediate goal. Though RBI is going to support growth, but the immediate goal will be what? Immediate goal will be handling inflation. Is that clear? Okay. And strong macroeconomic fundamentals combined with capital expenditure promoting inflows. So if you see the budget in comparison to 2016 till now, okay, what is the capital expenditure in the budget? Approximately how many crores? Somebody said something. Capital expenditure from 2016 till now, it has increased by almost 4 times. Increased by 4 times. In the budget, there's a graph also which says 4x. Increased by 4 times. And capital expenditure, if you see, around 10,000 crores. Okay, so government is very particular with respect to spending money on capital expenditure. Okay, realizing the objectives of Amrit Kal mentioned in the budget laid down a plan for next 25 years, refers to the same period as Amrit Kal. Okay, so here talking about the capital expenditure, the budget is very much keen on that. Till here, I think things are clear. You've got a brief understanding of the topic. Okay, now moving forward. The topic goes like this. There are some monetary developments which are mentioned. Okay, so in this monetary development, obviously why inflation has increased. This is what the aspect talks about. Okay, so why inflation has increased, or why there is a problem, why the countries have gone ahead with monetary tightening, or why is that countries like India, we have come up with this aspect called as what? Standing deposit facility, etc. So one observation is, one big challenge is COVID pandemic uncertainty. Okay, so because of COVID uncertainty, investments drop, not only in India, but across the globe. Okay, along with that, if we talk about the war means these countries are gone. Okay, so they will not invest. Are you able to get this? Okay, so they will not invest in India also, obviously. So invest in India. So that means our investments will get affected. They'll take a beating. Okay. And supply chain disruptions, oil prices increased. Okay. Along with oil prices, we also know food prices, fertilizer prices, everything. Economic survey talks about all this. All these prices have increased because of war. Investments have decreased, but prices have increased. Means all this was leading to increase in inflation. All this was leading to what? Increase in inflation, but uncertainty. Okay. So supply chain disruptions. So supply chain disruptions will increase headline inflation or core inflation. I think you got my question. Supply chain disruptions will increase headline or core? Headline. Why headline? Because core is basically demand-related inflation. Okay. Headline includes the volatile aspects like food, etc., fuel, etc. And supply chain disruptions will have a major impact on that. Okay. And supply chain disruptions can have a bigger impact on our CPI combined, because around 45% of the weightage in this CPI combined is given to food. Are you able to get my point? Okay, so this was one reason why, okay, this was increasing our headline inflation and investments going down, uncertainty, etc. And China is one entity which is a supplier for many countries. That means if China is in problem, China decided to stop its operations, okay, based on these aspects like zero COVID policy, etc. And almost all the countries are dependent on China. Automatically, it will have a wider impact not only on inflation of the countries, but also on growth. Is this clear? Understood? Okay? Okay. Now, MPC hiked its rates by 250 basis points, and then introduction of standing deposit facility, which replaced the reverse repo rate as the new floor rate of liquidity adjustment facility. Now, this is the area. So, I'll ask you, what is this standing deposit facility? Okay. It is above the reverse repo or it is below the reverse repo? If it is below the reverse repo, banks will be interested? Okay, got the point. Okay. I'll explain. These are some rates here. Okay. Now, this black line is the fixed reverse repo rate. Okay. This black one is the fixed reverse repo rate. Okay. You can see this. It is gone. Okay. And this is fixed. This is fixed at 3.5. During COVID pandemic, listen very carefully. During COVID pandemic, our policy rates were shifted. During COVID pandemic, our policy rates were shifted from repo to reverse repo. Policy rate. See, this is now our policy rate is repo only. During COVID pandemic, policy rates were shifted. Why? Because earlier the gap between repo and reverse repo were something like 25 basis points. Earlier, for example, if this is my reverse repo, then this should be my repo. And this should be my MSF. Marginal standing facility. This is how it was. Now, wantedly during COVID, this rate, reverse repo, was operated as the main policy rate, means RBI decided basically to pull this down to this 3.35, the black line. This is your fixing it off, 3.35 around. Okay, so they maintained it at 3.35 for a very long period. Are you able to get this? So they wanted to demotivate banks from putting money into RBI. That time you wanted to inject liquidity. You know? So that time your logic was to inject liquidity and increase growth. To do that, you wantedly reduce the reverse repo rate, or you came up with this fixing this reverse repo rate at this level. There is no, this was 3.35. This is fixed at that. 3.35, 3.5, it is fixed at that level. You are not changing it. Repo is changing, but this is not changing. Okay, so the only reason for that is using this rate. This is a less rate, so banks should not be putting their money into RBI. Okay, if they put money into the RBI, they're not interested in lending money to public, then economic growth will not happen. So the whole logic was reduce this to such an extent so that they will not park the money with RBI. This was the intention of coming up with this. Are you able to get this? Now later on, after COVID pandemic situation started recovering, now the question comes up, liquidity started increasing and inflation became a major challenge now. For you, now again, this is the biggest challenge, inflation. Now you want a separate tool so that you wanted to remove excess liquidity which is available with the banks. You want to remove the excess liquidity which is available with the banks. And for that logic, they have come up with this rate called as standing deposit facility rate. Standing deposit facility rate. Are you able to get this? Remove liquidity. You are removing liquidity. So it is the rate at which banks are pushing their money into RBI. Banks are pushing their money into RBI. Now suppose if you're saying the SDF rate is 6%. Okay. Repo rate is 6.5, 50 basis points below. Okay. If I'm putting it this way, so you can see, okay, 6.5 suppose, this is 6.5 and I put the SDF rate at let's say 6%. SDF rate at 6. SDF rate at 6. SDF rate at 6. I put SDF rate at 6 and repo rate at 6.5. Now, what is the logic here? The banks can straight away put their excess cash with RBI and get an interest of 6%. So get an interest of 6%. And moreover, there is no GSECs or collateral required when it comes to SDF. Automatically, liquidity removal will be easy. No collateral is required. For example, reverse repo rate, RBI has to put some collateral in the form of GSEC, isn't it? Though banks are parking money with RBI, okay, RBI has to put some collateral with the banks. So that is not there when it comes to SDF. I hope it is clear. So the word SDF and the difference between SDF and, so the purpose of SDF is to pull out excess liquidity which is there in the market. Is that clear? Okay. And there is no collateral security that is required as it is required for reverse repo rates. This is the main aspect. So reverse repo rate they will not use now. Obviously, reverse repo rate is almost replaced by SDF because it is easier for the banks, okay, to park money. And reverse repo rate has some control. Now, RBI has some control on reverse repo. When there is a collateral, RBI will have some control. No, RBI have to put some security. So RBI has control, but RBI doesn't have so much of control on. Is that clear? Understood? Okay. It will not be. Generally, is reverse repo rate anytime more than the repo? No. Okay, so no. So if you do that, then banks will not be lending only. It will be less. If repo rate is higher, okay, banks lending to public will automatically decrease, no? Okay. So here, this is nothing but what I've explained. Then you go through, it is very simple. Okay, so without collateral, Monetary Policy Committee indicates a stand shift from accommodative to accommodative and focused on withdrawal of accommodation while supporting growth. What I have mentioned. Reserve money increased by 10.3. Reserve money. Reserve money includes currency in circulation plus banks deposits with RBI plus other deposits with RBI. Okay. And what does M3 include? What does M3 include? Currency and coins with public. Currency and coins in the hands of public. Okay. Currency and coins in the hands of public plus demand deposits with banks plus term deposits with banks, plus other deposits with RBI. Okay, this is the minor amount, so therefore this is generally not mentioned. This is generally not mentioned. Tomorrow what happens in the prelims if he is saying, what does M3 constitute? And if he is giving currency and coins in circulation, first option. And second, demand deposits, term deposits. Or you can say, this I can say, currency and coins in circulation, plus, this is, shall I write total deposits? Shall I write total deposits here? Or you want me to write something else? This is NDTL, net demand and time deposits. It is net demand and time deposits, plus then you will have something like the other deposits with RBI. Are you able to get this? No. So why? Because banks deposits in the bank. Banks deposits in the bank are not part of money supply. It is only public's money. So this is, what is this NDTL now? This is basically what you should understand is tomorrow if he is giving banks deposits if he is giving in the options of M3, that is wrong. Why that is wrong? Because banks deposits should be deducted for getting NDTL. So that means it is something like the total deposits in the bank, demand plus both. Demand plus time, both are there. Okay, minus banks deposits. Banks deposits should not be there. Banks deposits should not be there. Banks deposits in the bank should not be there because banks are money creators. That will not be part of money supply. So this should not be there. And that is what is this NDTL. So banks deposits should not be there because if it is there, it is not going to be part of our M3. Okay, so that is the reason it's not total. In fact, it's like NDTL plus the other deposits. Is that clear? Okay, so economic survey says money multiplier M3 by the M0, M3 by M0 is almost stable. This is what the economic survey says. The money multiplier explains how an increase in the monetary base causes a money supply to increase by a multiplied effect. It is defined as the ratio of broad money over the reserve money, and this is almost stable according to economic survey. M3 by M0 is stable. Okay, so is this clear? Understood, I believe. No post office here. Okay. Now liquidity conditions. Okay, so the next area in the chapter is about the liquidity conditions. Now you know about most of the things, you have an idea now. Now see here, the liquidity conditions, liquidity was surplus post-COVID due to conventional methods. Post-COVID, they've started pushing money through different means. Emergency credit line scheme. So there, RBI is giving easy credit to MSMEs. MSMEs, easy credit. So credit supply was increasing to industries, etc. And long-term repo operations, long-term loans given by RBI at repo rates. Okay, or targeted repo, where banks have to push their money into certain targeted instruments like commercial paper, etc. Okay, you're taking loan from RBI, but that money has to be invested into certain targeted instruments. That means yields of these instruments would have increased. Are you able to get this now? They are spending, they are buying. Okay, commercial. So this is something targeted repo adopted by RBI, which was moderated by adopting the tightened. All this you did to inject liquidity, and then you decided inflation is increasing globally. Let me remove liquidity, and therefore you decided to come up with a tightened monetary policy. Is that okay? Now, response. Withdrawal of surplus liquidity pushed the weighted average call rate, the operating target of monetary policy. So I've written here, the operating target of monetary policy is this weighted average call rate has come very close to the repo rate on an average basis. Are you able to get this? That is what is the weighted, that is the operational. Last year they have put this target like, okay, 6-7 months back, that the weighted average call rate would be something like the operational target of monetary policy. Okay, that means if this rate is very close to repo, you have reached the target. Very close to repo, you have reached the target. Okay. Now MSF rate was obviously above policy rate by 25 basis points. This is what they did. This is the response. Means to monetary tightening, for monetary tightening, what did they do? And hike in CRR, 50 basis points. And treasury bills, 3-month certificate of deposit, commercial papers gradually firmed up in line with increase in repo. Okay. Their yields also increased along with increase in repo. We know about treasury bills. Steady increase in the interest rates on all financial assets is reflected in the tightened monetary conditions. Interest rates on all financial instruments have increased because of the tightened monetary conditions. This is what is that. So to do this is all these things they have done. Is this clear? Yes. Okay, so interest rates have increased. Lending and deposit rates have the banks increased during 2023. Okay, and this I will discuss in inflation. This point, leave it, because next topic also I will be taking. So there I will discuss WPI, CPI, that time we will see. So transmission is happening quickly as repo rate, this is not, okay, this is, repo rate is increased by 250 basis points. Okay, now see here. Now this is a graph given in the economic survey. Now the question comes up, federal tightening. So I'll ask you some questions. Now everything is interlinked here. Okay, so here, what is the impact of federal tightening, interest rates increase on rupee value? Rupee value depreciates. Federal tightening means, obviously, see here, federal tightening means less money, less dollar supply. Okay, less dollar supply means, obviously, in the international market, dollar will become what? Stronger. I have to pay more rupees to get the dollar, more rupees to buy the dollar. So rupee value will depreciate. This will again started making our imports costly. Then obviously the first import that can become costly is obviously the oil. And this can lead to inflation. So monetary tightening can obviously have an impact. So here if we see in this area, whenever the bond oil prices are increasing, bond yields were increasing. Okay. And whenever oil prices were decreasing, bond yields were decreasing. So oil prices increase, bond yields increase. Oil prices decrease, bond yields decrease. This is what the graph says. So oil prices have a direct impact with respect to the bond yield. Okay, so here yield on the 10-year GSEC bond rose in 2022. So I asked you this question, what would have happened? Okay, so one question to you all, if there is, government is focused on bridging its deficits. Government is focused on bridging its deficits through issuing bonds or whatever it is. Okay, what is the, now suppose 9.2% is the FD for the government. Okay, the deficit for the government increased during COVID. So government, let's say government decided to bridge its deficits by issuing some bonds or issuing some GSEC. What will happen to the bond yields? Got the question? What will happen to the bond yield? Increase. Okay. So why? Wow. Because one is, it can lead to increase in inflation, and inflation will have a negative impact on bond yields. Okay. So here one more point which you will remember is, in US, there is a clear depiction of, inverted bond yield. In US, there is a clear depiction of inverted bond yield of the treasury bonds of US, which is a clear indicator that recession in US is about to come. It's a clear indicator that recession is about to come. So during the pandemic period, one is bond yields have increased, no doubt about it. Okay, now inverted bond yield with respect to the treasury bills or the treasury bonds of US, this is a clear indicator that there will be a recession which is about to come. Okay, so this is one fact which you will remember, which is a recent scenario which they have seen, and this can be asked in the exam instead of asking directly about bond yield, because last year already bond yield was asked. What are the factors that will affect bond yield? Federal bank policy, inflation, okay, currency value. Like this, there was already a prelims question asked. Okay, so now if I'm taking something like the maturity period of the bond on x-axis, the number of years, okay, and if I'm taking the bond yield on y-axis, okay, obviously you should be knowing that the graph, a normal graph should be going in this fashion. A normal graph, that means long-term bonds should pay me higher interest. So when I am referring to this yield is nothing but the coupon to the current price of the bond. The coupon to the current price of the bond. That is what is yield. Suppose a bond is 100 rupees. The offer they are doing on the bond, they are paying you something like 5 rupees on the bond. This 5 rupees is nothing but the coupon offered on the bond. This is nothing but the coupon offered on the bond. So my yield is nothing but this 5 out of 100. This is the coupon divided by the price of the bond, current price of the bond. Suppose you are if this bond is sold to somebody at 90, then my yield becomes coupon divided by the 90 rupees. Are you able to get this? Okay, so this is what you should understand. So here price is reduced, so yield is going to increased. That is how you say bond prices are basically, bond price will be inversely related to what? Bond yield. Is that okay? Okay, now taking that into consideration, the expectation is when I am holding the bond for a long-term period, I should also get higher yields. This is called as a normal yield curve. Normal. Normal means long-term bonds are paying me higher yields. That is normal. Okay, so this normal slowly can turn out to become flat. Flat. Okay, so there can be something like steep bond yields also. Steep is something like suddenly yields have increased. Suddenly yields have increased. This is steep. So after COVID, okay, oil prices are increasing, etc. Suddenly bond prices are increasing means, bond yields are increasing means there will be a steep shift. Steep. Yields suddenly increased. Are you able to get this? Now flat is something like the bond yields have stabilized. Okay, and from here, the graph changes like this. From here, from this point, now this is the line, then it moves downward, so my graph becomes like this now. This is what is the inverted yield. This is what is the inverted bond yield. I think you're getting my point. Invert, reverse. Inverted means here long-term bond is paying you more or less. Long-term bonds, reverse it is. Long-term bonds are paying you less yield. Long-term bonds are paying less yield. Are you able to follow? Okay, so in this case, this reverse inverted graph, you'll understand that the long-term bonds are paying you less yield. So, if there is a recession that is about to come, negative growth rate, more than 2 quarters, economy not doing well, people will invest in short-term instruments or they will be more keen on putting money into long-term instruments. Okay. No. Already, there are only 2 options basically. Okay, short is there, then long is there. Short-term, long. Here the question is, if there is a recession, which you know that recession is about to come, very near. Okay, so the risk will be higher in the short term. Are you able to get my point? No. So risk will be higher in the short term. No. So you know that another 3 months, suppose recession is about to come. Another 4 months, recession is about to come. So why to put money into short term? Let me put in something which is far away. 2 years, 3 years instruments, 4-year instruments. Why should I put my money into short term? Are you able to get my point? Okay, so if I'm putting my money into buying long-term bonds, people are decided to put their money buying long-term bonds, means what will happen to the price of these long-term bonds? Price of the long-term bond should increase. No, demand for these long-term instruments will increase. Because short-term there is recession, there is risk, so better I buy long-term. So if you're buying long-term means risk, that means the demand for these long-term instruments is going to increase. Are you able to follow? So if demand for long-term instruments is increasing, then what should happen to the price? Price of the long-term instrument should increase. No, price of the long-term instrument should increase. That means what should happen to the yield of long-term instruments? Decrease. Yield of long-term instruments should decrease. Reverse. Reverse, no. Here, long-term bonds, yields have come down. Are you able to get this? Yields have come down, long-term bonds, reverse. This is indicating that recession is about to come. Probably in prelims, what does an inverted bond yield indicate? It indicates that recession is fast approaching. That is the answer. I hope it is clear. You there? Yes, sir. Okay. Yes. Okay. Now see here. This is easy. Developments in the GSEC market. Now why there was this rise, we observed this jump, 2022. Yields have increased, okay. And here, yield spikes reflects in uncertainty in crude oil prices. If he's giving options like this, okay, so 1, 2, 3, he can give. Hawkish stance of the central banks, increase in interest rates, Okay. And then hardening of global bond yield. Across the globe, bond yields have increased means investors may shift there. Okay, so obviously your yields also should increase. Otherwise, investors can move. Okay, and pressure on the rupee value depreciation. So these are something like which is clearly mentioned. All these points are mentioned in the economic survey, and they can ask it as in the form of options 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, one more important aspect which says is when it comes to trading with respect to the bonds in the secondary market, you will find that the private sector banks emerged as the dominant trading segment in the secondary market. Private sector banks. So when it comes to trading with respect to bonds, the private sector banks emerged as a dominant trading segment in the secondary market, followed by foreign banks, public sector banks, primary dealers, and mutual fund. At least we will remember only one, that the private sector banks did the maximum volume of trading in the secondary market when it comes to bonds. Is this clear? So this is a fact which you can get from the economic survey. Government security is a tradable instrument issued. So this is something you should be like, it is later you can read. Okay, now in the banking sector performance, let's see. This is something like what happened with respect to the banking sector, which I already mentioned in the introduction. Reduced NPA and reduced threat of default. Now see this graph. Declining banks' gross NPA ratio. This is the gross NPA ratio. So we observe that the gross NPA ratios are going down. Okay, so gross NPA ratios are going down. So if you, so public sector banks, you can see September. Okay, so gross NPA ratio has come down. Okay, even for the private sector banks and even for the all the scheduled commercial banks, the gross NPAs have reduced. Okay, indicating a positive aspect. And if we observe here, the provisioning requirements have improved. Provisioning. So provisioning coverage ratio, the total provisioned amount, okay, to the bad assets, that was increasing and this was decreasing. This is what the graph says. If I subtract the provisioning requirements minus the gross NPA, I arrive at something called as the net NPA. Net NPA is nothing but the gross NPA minus the provisioning requirement made by the banks, and that has reduced even more. So this has reduced to almost 5%, that has reduced even more. Okay, so this is what the graph says. Okay, so gross NPA ratio is the ratio of total gross NPA to the total advances given by the banks. And provisioning coverage ratio, mandatory for Indian banks to create a provisionary fund to cover their anticipated bad loans. Anticipated bad loans. And banks set aside certain provisions for bad loans from the bank's own funds, mostly from their profits. Is that clear? Okay. So here, this is a broad-based improvement in the NPAs. Okay, when it comes to different sectors, here sector-wise he has shown. So one is agriculture, here industry, services, and personal loans. Okay, so that is a graph which. Okay, so here capital adequacy ratio improvement clearly visible. Okay, 16%, well above the requirement of 11.5, and the graph clearly shows the capital adequacy was well above the required norms. Okay, so this is one observation from the capital adequacy ratio. Okay, now what economic survey says is, so the economic survey says IBC was the most successful entity which has recovered maximum. IBC? Okay, so we have SARFAESI Act, debt recovery tribunals, lok adalats are there. Okay, and we also have the ARC is part of SARFAESI. I'll put it as part of SARFAESI, private ARCs. After the SARFAESI Act only it came up. So IBC was more successful. Economic survey says IBC is more successful. And resilient and well-capitalized banking sector, this was mainly because of few reasons. So one is the regulatory supervised, that is asset quality review. So if you know, the NPAs were maximum between 2011 to 16. Maximum. Okay, so this was the period. So 2016, we have come up with IBC. Okay. Initially 2002-3, okay, 2002-3 also, we have come up with several mechanisms. One is we have come up with the SARFAESI Act. The graph is there here, SARFAESI Act. And then under the SARFAESI Act, we have come up with private asset reconstruction companies, private ARCs, which were not successful. Private ARCs were also, so their primary function is to what? Recover the bad loans. Okay. And subsequently, several things were done after 2011. One is RBI came up with the concept of special mention accounts. Special mention accounts. RBI said from 2015 plus, we will identify loans before they become NPA. Before they become NPA. So they have categorized something like 3 types. SMA 0, SMA 1 and SMA 2. 3 categorizations they have done. So loan payment is not done between 1 to 30 days, 31 to 60 days and 61 to 90 days. This is SMA 2. So if I can identify the bad loan in this category itself, okay, in this category itself, then I can prevent the loan from becoming an NPA. That means once it crosses this 90, it turns out to become NPA. Okay, so in NPA again we have substandard, we have doubtful and loss making. Okay, so before it becomes an NPA, the asset quality review should be good. So asset quality reviews were good. So earlier there were several questions. Inter-creditor agreement. This was asked by UPSC already. Okay, inter-creditor agreement. What is this inter-creditor agreement? Related to banking only. Okay, handling NPAs. Or there was something like the 5/25 rule RBI came up with. Or RBI came up with strategic debt restructuring. Or RBI came up with schemes like S4A, Indradhanush. All these are related to NPS. So many, they have done so much. In the sense like these S4A scheme is also related to that. They have asked, okay, and they have asked about 5/25. All these were already asked. And they have also asked inter-creditor agreements with respect to certain loans. Okay, that I'll show you the previous questions after 5-10 minutes. So inter-creditor agreement, all that is also with respect to handling NPA. In spite of doing all this, we were not successful. Okay, and therefore, there was this suggestion given in the previous economic surveys and this economic survey. It says we have done this well, and therefore banks are adequately capitalized now. So this is basically called as the 4R approach, which is mentioned in the economic survey. So this 4R approach talks about recognition. That means I am identifying the bad loans before they turn out to become NPA. So if I can identify them in the special mention category itself effectively, I can clean these loans or I can make them more stable. This is the logic basically. So your asset, recognizing the bad loans or recognizing the loans before they turn out to become a non-performing asset. If you are able to identify them in the special mention category, special mention account category, probably efforts can be pushed to prevent it from turning out to become something like NPA. So here you are coming up with something like recognition. Then economic survey says we have come up with resolutions. You have done many, but the main resolution is something like the IBC. You have come up with asset quality review. This is asset quality review 2015. All this is part of that. Asset quality review, etc. Now, resolution, IBC was one of the most successful resolutions till now, according to economic survey. Okay, why and all, they'll talk about it. Then they are focused on recapitalization. Budget was used to recapitalize banks or recapitalization bonds. UPSC asked in 2016, the recapitalization funds going into the banks have continuously increased since last 5 years. The answer is wrong. Answer is no, but this was a prelims question which was asked that time. So it was a kind of a trend-based question. So recapitalization, adequately capitalizing banks through whatever means it can be. It can be through the budget, you can recapitalize them, or it can be through recapitalization bonds, whatever it is. Okay, and reforms. So talking about bank mergers, etc. Bank mergers, merger of banks, etc. All this. Okay, so these are reforms. There is some more reforms which, reforms efficiency is little less, but definitely they are putting in effort to come up with better reforms with respect to banking, but still it is not completely there. That is what the economic survey says. So recognition, resolution, recapitalization. Okay, and here strengthened regulatory and supervisory framework. So one is asset quality review, long back, and then prompt corrective action mechanisms. increasing the provisioning requirements, etc. Okay. Is that clear? Yes. This is gone. Okay. Okay. Now, this is about the improvement in the credit growth rate. So this is something very interesting as far as Indian context is concerned. So why? Because when there is tightening happening, we will also find that the credit has accelerated. Okay, so credit growth is growing in double digits. It's an indicator that it is a favorable aspect with respect to growth. So this is what the graph says here. So here if we see from April to December, okay, so you can see there is a credit increase, clearly indicating that especially the non-food bank credit growth in double digit since April. Is that clear, everybody? Okay. Now, there are some facts. The credit that is increasing is mainly increasing because of the rising demand for home loans. So when I talk about the retail credit, so there is one fact which is mentioned in the economic survey. So when we talk about the retail credit is mainly increasing because of the rising demand for these loans which are home loans. Okay, now talking about agriculture and light sector credit growth, this is mainly because of the measures taken by the government. Okay, and industrial credit growth has picked up due to mainly credit in MSMEs. The economic survey says industrial credit growth has picked up, and it is also because of the emergency credit line guarantee scheme implemented by the government during COVID to take care of MSMEs. Is that okay? Okay, so this is a factual thing. Okay, so this is a factual. In retail, it is mainly home loans. That is what you'll remember. Credit growth has increased, non-food credit, and in spite of tightening. And in retail, it is mainly because of home loans. And then government's concessional institutional higher credit has increased because of government's measures with respect to agriculture. Industrial credit has picked up mainly because of credit of micro, small and medium enterprises. Credit going to MSMEs, that is what you will remember. And emergency credit line guarantee scheme implemented, or the schemes like production link incentive schemes, etc. were beneficial. Now here, services credit growth due to recovery in credit to NBFCs, real estate and trade sectors. Okay, so here this particular aspect shows non-food credit with respect to all the entities, whether it is agriculture, industry or services, you will find there is a jump, there is an increase. Okay. See, this is about the NBFC credit. Non-banking financial companies continue to recover. Okay, so NBFC is recovering. This is what the economic survey says. Okay, and NBFCs deployed the largest quantum of credit from their balance sheets to the industrial sector, followed by retail, services and agriculture. If at all a fact has to be asked. Okay, so this is a fact. NBFCs deployed the largest quantum of credit from their balance sheets to their industrial sector, followed by retail, services and agriculture. Okay, so that is a fact which you will remember. That is what we get to know from here, 37.5. And okay, so increasing credit disbursements by NBFC. This graph shows about increasing credit disbursements by NBFC. Okay, so one more aspect here is continuous improvement in asset quality. I think, okay, this will not go now. Okay, so no problem. See here, continuous improvement in asset quality is seen in the declining NPA ratio. This is for the NBFCs. Okay, so NPA is going down even for NBFC. This is what is understood from this graph. Okay, so NPA is reducing. Okay, September 2022, you can observe NPA is going down. Gross overall, NPA is going down. Okay, so that is one observation here. Okay, so here banks' profits have gone up. Okay, and here NBFCs also. So capital position of NBFCs remain robust with the capital adequacy ratio of around 27. I mentioned this in the starting. Okay, and well above the regulatory requirement. And return on assets. Okay, so basically profits, return on assets have increased. Okay, so for the NBFCs as well. So this is one observation here. And see here, NBFC's performance and recouping return on assets is robust capital formation. So this is something very clear from this graph. Okay, that there is NBFCs have improved. This is what this particular graph is going to mention. Okay, so better we'll take a break, then we'll fix this off. Yes. Okay. So there is this aspect here. Listen. The improvement in banking sector was mentioned here, and that was also because of IBC. This is what the economic survey says. So insolvency and bankruptcy code. So here, two things we will try to understand. Okay, so one is here, this reform enacted in 2016, it has pushed in various laws relating to the insolvency resolution of the business firms. It lays down a clear-cut and faster insolvency proceedings to help creditors such as banks recover dues, etc. Now, the one thing what insolvency economic survey talks about IBC is, it is not much keen with respect to aspects like haircuts. Okay, it says haircuts is not a main factor which will talk about the efficiency of IBC. Okay, so what is this haircut? So how much out of the total credit given, how much money you should forego? The creditor has to forego some amount of money. Okay, so that is what is called as the haircut. Okay, the creditor has to forego some amount of money. Okay, so here this economic survey talks about corporate resolution procedures, and it also gives some data. It also gives some data about which entities or which industries, etc., are more stuck. For example, when we talk about real estate, maximum of ongoing resolution procedures are there with real estate. Okay, some data is given. And few things what we should understand is, we all know that based on the recent reforms, that the settlement should be done in how many days? 330 days. According to the new norms, the settlement has to be done within a span of 330 days. Economic survey says we are on the right track. So it mentions somewhere around 530 days or less than almost like 2 years as a positive aspect for resolution. Insolvency bankruptcy resolution is happening within a span of 2 years. So the resolution procedure is getting completed within a span of 2 years. Are you able to get this? Okay, this is one important aspect which economic survey talks about. Second important aspect you should be knowing is, there were a lot of amendments which were brought in with respect to IBC. For example, 2018 amendment was there, 2020 again. Okay, so here one understanding is, along with the financial creditor, or the operational creditor, financial creditor, operational creditor, okay, as well as the debtor, it can be a corporate company, it can be a corporate entity, can take up the insolvency resolution, can take up the case to the, these tribunals, no? One is the DRT and NCLT, isn't it? Okay, so any of these three can take the case to the NCLT. Okay, so this is one thing. Earlier in 2016, operational creditors were not given much of importance. But later on with the amendments, even operational creditors are given sufficient importance when it comes to IBC. This is also one more important aspect which you should be understanding. Operational creditor, okay, he is a secured creditor. He is a secured creditor, okay, because they keep some security for giving loans, banks, etc. Okay. Operational creditor, not so secured, obviously not secured, but they can also take the case and go, not secured creditor. So during COVID pandemic, there were some comments made that insolvency bankruptcy code is not doing well, and especially companies like Videocon, etc., there were haircuts up to 95%. But what government specifically says is, this haircut we cannot say as a mechanism for deciding the efficiency of insolvency bankruptcy code, because beforehand you decide no that if we want to go ahead with this procedure, the creditor would have accepted that we will be able to accept so much. Okay, so we'll be accepting something like 10% of the credit amount or 30% of the credit amount, whatever it is. It is decided beforehand, and then you go for the resolution. So when you're going for the resolution, the efficiency of resolution is out of the total amount you said you want to recover, if you are able to recover something close to it, then the insolvency resolution procedure is efficient. So this is what economic survey clearly mentions. Are you able to follow? Okay, so you'll decide on the amount to be recovered. If they have already accepted for a haircut, they have already accepted to forego certain amount of money. So that should not be the criteria for deciding the efficiency of IBC. Okay, so this is what you'll observe here. Okay, so reforms are enacted. Insolvency is a situation where individuals are unable to repay their outstanding debt, and bankruptcy is a basic procedure to recover. Now this word can come up in exam, haircuts. So haircuts are defined as the losses incurred by the creditors, banks in this case, on resolving the bad debts or the stressed assets. Okay, so this term can come up in the exam with respect to insolvency and bankruptcy code. Now here, ease of doing business. IBC will also help in ease of doing business, facilitating the process of exit. Okay, so ease of doing business, one of the important aspect is easy exit here. So IBC has facilitated the exit of distressed firms, thereby allocating scarce economic resources towards more productive use. So obviously banks' NPAs also have decreased. This is what the economic survey says, because of the efficiency of IBC, efficiency of IBC. Okay, so here this is basically the corporate resolution procedures. How many resolution procedures are closed and how many are ongoing. Okay, so this is what this box talks about. Now what becomes important for us? We are not so keen with respect to this diagram. Here 5,893 corporate insolvency processes had commenced, of which 67% have been closed. Okay, so 67% is a decent aspect when we talk about insolvency. And the recovery rates were almost like 33%. So 33% recovery rate is a decent rate when we talk about India's case. But because in India, recovering bad loan was never more than 10 to 11%. So if you talk about 33% recovery, according to economic survey, it is pretty decent to tell that the IBC was efficient enough in terms of recovery. Okay, so that is something which you will remember. Okay, and here there is some analysis that is given. Sectoral breakup, maximum cases are ongoing basically here. Ongoing resolution processes are there, maximum with respect to textiles and basic metals. So this is one data. 90% I don't think such factual questions can be asked. Okay, so but real estate you can remember because it is huge in services. Okay, so ongoing resolution procedures, if I take, major chunk is basically textiles, leather, apparel products and basic metals. This is what economic survey talks about. Okay, and here with respect to the services sector, you can observe this is a huge chunk, real estate activity. Are you able to get this? So this is a easy understanding. So seeing this graph, real estate is major chunk here, and then comes wholesale and retail trade. Okay. Now one more important benefit which economic survey was talking about is there is a behavioral change through IBC over a period of time. Now they observed that there's a behavioral change that is basically business relationship. This talks about something like reduction of willful defaulters. So economic survey clearly talks about the reduction of willful defaulters. You know who's a willful defaulter? Those who have the ability to pay, but still they are not paying. They are called as willful defaulter. So earlier Vijay Mallya was a earlier. Okay, so willful defaulter. Willful defaulter is somebody who has the ability to pay, but still is not paying. So improvement, this is a behavioral change that is observed. That means the reduction with respect to willful defaulters, etc. It's a positive outcome along with the efficiency of IBC. Now economic survey gives some facts like 69% of the distressed assets rescued. So till now around out of 100, let's say 69% of the distressed assets have been rescued, and they have achieved a realization value around 178% of the liquidation value. So you have assumed that the liquidation value is something like some 1,000. You have achieved the realization was something like 178% of the liquidation value. So this is something like a positive aspect which is mentioned. Of course, for mains probably we can use it, but in prelims I don't think we can use this data anywhere. Okay, and 92% of the value realized under the liquid, almost 92% of the value is realized, and nowhere it is talking about haircuts. Okay, so 92% of the value is realized under the liquidation process. This is what economic survey is mentioning. This is a data which I can use in IBC when I'm talking about positives of IBC. So when I talk about positives of IBC, I can say 33% of the cases, there was 33% recovery rate, and all these years the recovery is almost less than 11 to 12%. So which is an aspect of success of IBC. And second, I can say 69% of the distressed assets have been rescued through this process of IBC. This is something like a data which I will use to support IBC when I'm writing mains, obviously. Okay, so here IBC recovered the highest amount for the scheduled commercial banks. This is suppose he's asking, so IBC, there can be a statement in the exam saying that IBC recovered the highest amount for the scheduled commercial banks with respect to its bad loans. Then definitely answer is yes. This is what economic survey says, and this is what the table says. IBC was the most efficient entity which recovered maximum amount of money. Okay, so the total amount recovered by scheduled commercial banks under IBC has been the highest compared to the other channels which were there earlier. Okay, and one more important aspect which I have mentioned is time period of resolution after IBC, time period of resolution of loans after IBC is implemented is now around 530 days. Okay, so this is pretty decent. Okay, so of course we have targeted 330, but at least it is less than 2 years. This is what is the aspect. So a big achievement from the past, because earlier it was around how many years? 8 to 10 years. So that means the time-bound mechanism, you know that, no? Earlier it was 180 plus 90, 270, then 330. And in the newspapers in 2019, they were saying it was going around 772 days as well. Okay, but again, now you're talking about overall figures, you're saying it is 530 days, which is pretty decent, less than 2 years. And here it was almost like 8 to 10 years earlier, before IBC. I hope it is clear. Okay. So this is a table which gives the same aspect. This is about the recovery. IBC has recovered the maximum. Okay, so IBC has recovered the maximum. This is what the table talks about for the scheduled commercial banks. Okay. Now, talking about the stock markets. Okay. With respect to Adani, no discussions. Okay, you don't think I'm discussing about Adani now. Okay, so with respect to Adani, what is that was in news? Any related aspect related? Heard of short selling? Yes, short selling. So the term short selling can be a prelims area, obviously. A simple question like, what is short selling? What happens in short selling? Okay, so I'll talk about it after 5 minutes. Now see here. So here, developments in the capital market. Now, one observation is large number of small and medium enterprises coming out with the public offer, though fund mobilization has been not so high through IPOs. Okay, so that means they were ready at least. There was some confidence. There was that confidence that was there. Buoyant performance of primary market has been observed despite turmoil in the global financial markets. So one observation is the primary market started doing well, okay, in India. So especially when I'm talking about primary market, we are talking about these aspects like IPOs and FPOs, and specifically LIC being one of the huge IPOs, one of the biggest IPOs. Of course, now we are not happy with LIC, those who have purchased, but LIC IPO was a huge IPO. Okay, so this is what is clearly mentioned. So LIC IPO, largest IPO ever in India and the 6th biggest globally. And that was done during this period, which indicates that the primary market was doing well. Primary market means you're buying shares directly from the company. You're buying shares directly from the company. So debt, under activity in public debt issuances, more than that compensated by the private debt placement. So what we observe is in the debt segment, it is the private entity which was performing better than the public. Okay, so they were involved more. So the number of private debt placements increased by 11%, while resources mobilized increased by 6%. So this indicates that so the private debt placement increased by 11%. Now, when I ask you a simple difference, what is the basic difference between a public issue and a private placement? Public is basically everybody can participate. When I'm issuing some shares, whatever it is, everybody can participate. So private placement is not for everybody. Not for everybody. Then who is going to participate generally in the private placements? Qualified institutional buyers. You call them as qualified institutional buyers. Qualified institutional buyers. It is not for everybody. When I'm using the word IPO, it is for everybody. But when I'm saying private placement, it is not for everybody. It is only for the qualified institutional buyers. Those who are already have experience with respect to stock market and they have already taken licenses from SEBI. They are going to operate. It can be insurance companies, pension fund companies, all these entities. Okay. So here, the number of private debt placements increased by 11%. This is an indication that private placement was responsible. Now, here the definition of primary market, you can read it later. So here you can see resource mobilization from the primary market. Okay, so when I'm talking about equity, here we have put IPOs, FPOs, okay, then rights issues, okay, so QIPs, preferential allotments, etc. And debt also, debt you have public debt as well as private placement. And there is this private placement aspect was at a higher level. This is what is the economic survey talking about. This is what I have mentioned. Is that clear? Okay. So this is purely factual here. Now talking about stock market performance. Now across the globe, stock markets were not doing well. And India also struggled, no doubt about it. But compared to the secondary markets outside, Indian market was doing pretty okay. Indian market was doing pretty okay. This is what the economic survey talks about. For example, if we see this, okay, so if we see this table, here if you see the other indexes, they're almost negative. Other indexes, they're almost negative here. Okay, so percentage change you can see here. Okay, it's almost negative here. Even in 2022, you can observe. Okay, but India's case, though we are not robust, at least you can see there is a positive aspect which is visible when it comes to our, even the secondary markets. Even the secondary markets, when we talk about our Nifties, so we are way better than the world around. So this is very important that if you make a comparison of the world, okay, if you see, okay, so India's growth is pretty decent. At least it is growing at a positive level. So this is something which you can observe with the secondary market also. Secondary market also, India is pretty decent. This is what economic survey says. Okay, so number of demat accounts were opened, have increased sharply, and global stock markets declined because of geopolitical uncertainty. Among major emerging market economies, India outperformed its peers in April to December. This is what is the understanding from that particular graph. So when you compare with the global scenario, India has done well from April to December. At least there is some positive aspect here. Is this clear? And you should be knowing the differences between primary and secondary market. Okay, private placement and public offer. Private placement and public offer. And what is this? Who is a qualified institutional buyer? Okay, somebody who has already some experience and taken licenses from. These are generally institutional buyers. Institutional buyers. Okay, so here, so one understanding. Now this is there in our material as well. So you know that in April to November, the Indian volatility index witnessed a declining trend as the impact of conflict started to wane as the year progressed. It shows the volatility is less when it comes to our stock markets. Volatility is less when it comes to our stock markets. Okay, so India Volatility Index, it is an index based on the Nifty index option prices in which the volatility figure percentage is calculated, which indicates the expected market volatility. Now, expected market volatility. Okay, over the next 30 days, what is going to be the volatility? This is what is going to be understood from this volatility index. Okay, and Indian Volatility Index uses the computation methodology for calculation with suitable amendments to adapt to the Nifty options order book. So what we are interested is, when it comes to volatility, we were less volatile in comparison to the international markets. That is one aspect. Second aspect, what we will remember for prelims is, this index basically will talk about the volatility for over the next 30 days. Volatility over the next 30 days. Is this clear? Okay. So this is one more important aspect. So if we see some previous questions also, we will see Sensex. Basically, Sensex, we want something like, I want to make a comparison with other countries also. Okay, so obviously that is the main reason, no? So if I take only Sensex, okay, so I can take Nifty, I can take Sensex, but here you're talking about a group of companies and you're giving a picture. But I want to know the overall picture, number one. Number two, I want to compare with other countries. That is the reason. Is that clear? Okay, so foreign investments. Now there is one table which shows, okay, there is one table which can come up in prelims in the sense that it shows there were foreign portfolio outflows. And we know that FPI, see I think before last year there were questions asked. There was one question which was asked. The question goes this way: which of the following is part of FDI? Which of the following is part of FDI? And he has given some options. For example, one option was foreign currency convertible bonds. You have seen that question. Okay, foreign currency convertible bonds, which is called as FCCB. Okay, so FCCBs are seen as part of FDI. Okay, so foreign currency convertible bonds. And then they asked FIIs with certain restrictions. FIIs with certain restrictions. So that means you should be knowing FII. If this investment is going above 10% in a particular entity, you henceforth call it as what? FDI. FDI. So this is FII with certain restrictions. That was a question. And then he was also asking about NRE deposits, etc. That was also one of the options, which is not. So like this, there can be questions in the exam. So this was one question which they have asked. Now, when I talk about portfolio investment, so portfolio investment is definitely not FDI. Portfolio investment is definitely not FDI. Okay, so portfolio investment is a wider connotation which includes FII as well. It's a wider connotation which includes FII as well. That means FII should be a subset of portfolio investment. FII should be a subset. Okay, so if this is FPI, okay, so if I say this is FPI, then FII is a major chunk. FII is a major chunk of FPI, portfolio investments. Is that clear? Okay. And they include other investments like qualified foreign investments, etc. All that is part of portfolio investments as well. But the major chunk of portfolio investment is FII. Okay. Now here, strong macroeconomic fund. FDI is not part of FPI, or FDI is not part of FPI. Already UPSC asked this question. Okay, earlier. FDI is not part of FPI, remember. Foreign direct investment. But another question that was asked is FI with certain conditions. That's a typical kind of question they have asked. That means he wants to know that you should be knowing that FI, if it crosses 10%, is seen as FDI. That means with certain condition, it can be seen as FDI. That was the question. Okay, but remember, FDI is not FPI. FDI is not FPI. Is that clear? Okay. So here, global economic factors such as inflationary pressures, monetary tightening by central banks, and recessionary fears in advanced economies, specifically inverted bond yields in US, exerted pressure on FPIs to sell in Indian markets. Okay. So the overall net investments by foreign portfolio investors during 23 registered an outflow. Okay, so outflow of 16,153 crore at the end of December, with both equity and debt segment witnessing net FPI outflows. So FPIs have moved out of India. This is what is the understanding from the table. That is what you will remember. FPIs have moved out of India. So if you see this table here, monthly FPI net investments movement outside. Okay, total you can see minus 16,153. So there was net FPI outflow. This is what you can observe, both debt as well as equity. both debt as well as equity. This is understanding. So one statement can be about FPI, another statement can be about the FPI outflows or something. So this is what the economic survey talks about. You'll just remember that FPI outflows were there. Okay, the overall net outflows were so much, and involves an investor. What is an FPI? Involves an investor buying some foreign financial asset. Okay, like anything of these. Is that clear? Okay. Many are tired. No, very good. Okay, now talking about US all cryptos. Okay, cryptos. Are cryptos a legal tender? No. First question, obviously. Second question, is legal tender and fiat money same? No. What is the difference? Huh? Legal tender is backed by asset. My question is very simple. UPSC asked a question already about a legal tender, isn't it? Okay. I am asking you what is the difference between a fiat and a legal tender. Now, crypto is not a legal tender. Legal tender is something that cannot be rejected. Legal tender is something that cannot be rejected. Okay. Fiat is something that is accepted by order. You're accepting it. For example, though dollar may be a fiat entity, but dollar can be rejected in India. If you're giving me dollar, I will say go. What should I do? I think you're getting my point. So something that to become a legal tender, first condition is it should be a fiat. To become a legal tender, it should be fiat. But just because something is a legal tender, so just because something is a fiat, that doesn't mean that it should be a legal tender. During demonetization, okay, so those 500 and 1,000, yes or no? Yes. Is that okay? Fine, fine. So now cryptos became volatile. I also lost a lot of money. So I have this experience in crypto. And crypto, basically, there are a lot of restrictions that have been brought in developed countries itself, including US. There's a lot of restrictions that they have brought in with respect to crypto. Okay, so crypto asset market has been very volatile. Nowadays, mining also has become very difficult. 6-7 computers you have to put and mine, it's not coming. Okay, so huge energy consumption, not so easy now. Okay, so yeah. So earlier we planned to put up some computers and mine. Okay, so now we understood you can't do anything. Okay, so crypto asset market has been very volatile with its total valuation swinging from almost 3 trillion to 1 trillion in 2023. Almost swing. Crypto cross-sector and cross-border nature limits the effectiveness of uncoordinated national approaches and hence regulate the crypto market and reduce their volatility. So more regulation has been brought in. Economic survey talks about not just India, but the developed world also. There has been a lot of regulation that has been brought in. Okay, so here European Union coming on notifying and licensing crypto assets and key entities. Okay, Switzerland is regulation by dividing cryptos in payment tokens, utility tokens and asset tokens. So there's a lot of regulation. So these examples suggest that global standards need to be more comprehensive and consistent. Regulator responses must be based on standard taxonomies, reliable data of address contagion effects. So here more regulations have been brought in, not so important. You can just glance through. It is there in our material as well. Okay. GIFT International Financial Services Center. Okay. So now you observe that entities from outside are very much keen to come and invest in India. Okay, so one important reason, it is a clear understanding that our macroeconomic fundamentals are doing well. Okay, so here we can observe, see, IFSC basically, International Financial Services Center, is a jurisdiction with high concentration of financial institutions such as banks, stock markets and related entities, and which offer specialized financial services to non-residents and residents to promote financial innovation and facilitate cross-border transactions. So more investments into IFSC, it clearly talks about progressive reforms with respect to our capital account convertibility. It indicates a progressive reform with respect to our capital account convertibility. You'll talk about that in detail in your external sector. Okay, so capital account convertibility, it indicates why most investments are easily moving into this. Is that clear? Okay, so government operationalized that IFSC at GIFT multi-services, SEZ in Gujarat, etc. Now, it has entered into a multi-sectoral, multilateral cooperation and agreements with International Organization of Securities Commission. So there is a lot of tie-ups which we are doing, which will enhance movement of foreign investments into the GIFT city. This is what the economic survey talks about. Okay, that is sufficient. Understanding what is IFSC and what is the regulatory authority. Okay, so regulation, how was, this is IFSCA is a regulatory authority. You know, I think you know this. Okay, so International Financial Services Center Authority basically has assumed the power of 4 domestic sector regulators, namely RBI, SEBI, IRD, IRDN, and also the Pension Fund Regulatory Authority. Is this clear? So that is one aspect which you will remember. Now, economic survey also talks about improvement in pension and insurance funds. What is the benefit if pension and insurance is going to increase or improve? So one is pension and insurance funds help in long-term investments. This is what the economic survey says. They can invest into long-term funds related to infrastructure. So this is a positive aspect. That means it will help in infrastructure financing. This is the logic. So pension and insurance funds, if they are doing well, that means if the insurance market is really doing well, the pension market is really doing well, it will help in long-term financing of infrastructure. Okay, so because banks have a challenge like asset liability mismatch. Talked about, you know this, right? Banks have a challenge of asset liability mismatch. They are not in a position to give long-term loans to infrastructure, but when insurance and pension fund entities can give better long-term loans to infrastructure. So this is one aspect which economic survey mentions. So India poised to emerge as one of the fastest growing insurance markets in the coming decade. Fastest growing. And insurance penetration in India has increased steadily. Okay, so this is the graph here. There's a graph here which talks about insurance penetration. So first of all, what is this insurance penetration? You will just try to understand this. Ratio of total insurance premium to the GDP. Okay, insurance penetration is nothing but the ratio of total insurance premium to the total GDP. Insurance density is the ratio of insurance premium to the population. Both are increasing. Are you able to get this? Okay, so these are 2 words which are mentioned in the economic survey. For suppose a word comes up in the exam. So insurance penetration measures insurance premium to the gross domestic product. Insurance density measures the ratio of insurance premium to the population. That is insurance premium per capita and is measured in US dollars. Now, here we can see this graph clearly shows there is a steady rise in insurance density as well as steady increase in insurance penetration. So if there is a statement in the exam, okay, so insurance penetration or insurance density is increasing. Okay, so then that statement should be right, obviously, because of this graph. Is this clear, everybody? Okay, a simple graph is given. So here some data is given. Life insurance penetration in India, you can see here, life insurance penetration in India was 3.2% in 2021, almost twice more than the emerging markets and slightly above the global average. Okay, so this is what the survey says. Insurance density in India has increased from 11.1 US dollars in 2001 to 91 US dollars in 2021. There is an increase with respect to insurance density. Is that okay? Understood. So it's factual. You just have to remember or just have to read once. That's all. Okay, there are some schemes here, okay, which are mentioned. These are there. I have to pick it from, this is there in the survey as well as in the material. So all these schemes are aimed at people at the lower end spectrum. Main purpose is to increase the risk appetite of people, which in turn helps in growth. So focusing on inclusiveness, automatically it will also lead to economic growth. That is what it says. So the last area in this chapter. Okay, this is about the pension sector. So this show has shown remarkable performance and has expanded since introduction of National Pension Scheme and Atal Pension Yojana. And coverage of population in pension has risen under NPS, etc. So there is a positive outlook with respect to pension as well. Insurance positive, pension as well, it is positive. Okay, so here if you see, this point is important. Pension sector and insurance sector collect long-term savings, around 25 to 30 years. They collect long-term savings. You're putting money for a long-term period, okay, which is a very favorable aspect for financing long-term investments like industries, infrastructure, etc. Unlike the banking system, the pension and the infrastructure is more better off in funding or financing infrastructure. Infrastructure, is that clear? You'll be reading that, right? So now outlook here, if you see, there is a resilience in the domestic financial system which is clearly visible. One is the healthy balance sheet, clearly visible. NPAs have reduced. Stronger capital level of NBFCs as well as banks, both. Clear understanding. We can use these points in the mains. There is a demand for bank credit, which is a clear indicator, a positive indicator for investment as well as economic growth. India can stay positive with respect to this aspect, definitely. And that is a clear sign of revival of investment cycle. This is also I've mentioned in the beginning. So something like 34% is also 4% increase or 3.8% increase is also pretty decent with respect to increase in the investment. Is that clear? Okay. And then IBC mechanism, ease of doing business as well as easy exit mechanism. Ease of doing business as well as easy exit. So this is a positive aspect. There is a resilience of the domestic financial system. It is clearly reflected in the economic survey through these aspects. Healthy balance sheets, appropriate capital maintenance by NBFCs and banks, demand for bank credit indicating positive aspect towards growth, so investments will flow, and then signs of revival of investment cycle clearly visible. Okay, and along with that, even the IBC is performing well. IBC is performing well. Along with that, even the stock market is also doing well. Equity markets are doing well. Okay, so in comparison to other countries. Okay, and here you can see India is one of the fastest growing insurance markets in the world. This is also an aspect here. Expected to be among top 6 in insurance market by 2032. Increase in FDI limit for insurance companies is likely to facilitate an increased flow of long-term capital. So this is about the chapter. Is this okay till here? Yes. This is from the material only. You'll go through this, especially data embassy. Okay, this is from our material itself. Okay, this I have pushed from the material itself. So you'll go through this data embassy, important. Class is not over. Okay, class is not over. I think. This is picked up from the material. Now, after so much of discussion, now you are giving wrong answers. Means all the effort is gone. Okay, so just at least identify. Insurance penetration has been steadily increasing with life insurance penetration being above the emerging markets and global averages. Okay, the pension sector has been taking rapid strides since the introduction of National Pension Scheme, more recently the Atal Pension Yojana. Very easy question. Generally positive. The good year itself, there, the first one. Okay, the first heading itself will help us to. Okay, so now see this. I don't think UPSC specific 2022, it will not ask, but this is for our understanding only. So economic survey considers the following statements regarding the steps taken by RBI and government towards banking sector. Implementation of 4R economic survey: recognition, resolution, recapitalization and reforms. Okay. And then efforts over the years have culminated in the enhancement of risk absorption capacity and a healthier banking system balance sheet, both. Yes, you know about NPA going down, coverage ratios, provisioning requirements improving, all that. So, easy to answer. This is, you will just, it's a, what should be the answer? After the whole Ramayana is over. Okay, now this is something like monetary tightening, we did that, this weighted average and all that. Only two. Decrease should go, that's all. Anything decrease means money supply will increase. Yes or no? Okay, very good. Consider the statements regarding Indian secondary market. Huh? First one is correct? No, no. What about the second one? Okay. Is that clear? Okay. Now wait. Class is not over. Give me 5 more minutes. 5-10 minutes. I have not started insurance chapter. This is basically previous. Okay, so 5 minutes, you'll see what kind of questions can come from our topic is very important. After putting in effort for the economic survey, we should also identify what kind of questions that can come up in the prelims. Okay, so now this question, so we have drawn a box, we said 1,000 rupees came in and that multiplied to 5,000, 5 times, etc. If there is more financial inclusion, more people putting deposits in the bank, then what will happen to money multiplier? It will increase. As simple as that. Is that clear, everybody? Okay, so this question was almost asked twice. Increase in the banking habit of the... so again, he will not ask. Now this question, again, this is again a conceptual question on our area. Now this is, here UPSC has specifically mentioned effect on aggregate money supply in the economy will be immediate here, immediate. Now this word immediate is important here. What is the answer? So if I say this is about, I don't know, is it visible? No. Okay. So when I say M3 is basically currency in circulation plus we have written what? Total, not total, net demand, okay, and time plus some other deposits. This is a major chunk. You are removing money from here, okay, and you are holding it here. This is what it is? Yes or no? Okay, so then obviously the overall entity will not change. But this is only because it is immediate. If it is not immediate, every 1,000 rupees, every 2,000 rupees going into that box, the multiplier effect has to increase. So in the long term, obviously, it changes. But since it is immediate, the answer should be what? To leave it unchanged. Very good. You know this, all this you have already solved, I believe. Legal tender, some creditor is under compulsion to accept in settlement of his claims. He can't say, I don't want rupees. Okay. And what about checks? Is check a legal tender? No. Okay. Check is something like a fiduciary money. Okay. So it will be only accepted if both the parties say, okay, I will accept. Is that okay? Yes. This was about the cryptos that was asked. Okay, this was about the crypto. So I can convert my economic survey slides into non-fungible token and sell, but nobody will buy. Okay, so the question is here, you can convert it and you can sell. Okay, so this is about the NFT. Okay, so that means about cryptos is already asked, NFT is also already asked. This is your observation. Okay, regulation and all you will go through. So earlier interest coverage ratio was asked. Okay, slippage ratio related to NPAs. Slippage ratio is related to NPA. Provisioning coverage ratio. Provisioning coverage ratio. Capital adequacy ratio. Improved, etc. Tier 1. Then comes additional tier 1 bonds. There can be a prelims question. What is this additional tier 1 bond? They can ask because it is continuously in news. So suddenly some ratio or incremental capital output ratio. Okay, capital output ratio is higher, is it better, or lower it is better? There are only two. Okay. Capital output ratio is the amount of capital that is required to produce a single unit of output. If you require more capital to produce a single unit of output, you are inefficient. You're inefficient. That means higher is the capital output ratio, you are not efficient. Developed countries have lower capital output ratio in comparison to developing countries. This is about capital output ratio. It is reverse. This ratio, it is higher the better. This is higher the better. Interest coverage ratio is something like, this is also related to banking. Why? The banks, when they are checking the firms, banks are checking the firms, you have to check whether that firm has the capacity to pay interest without much problem. If the firm has higher interest coverage ratio, it is better for the firm. That means your profits which you have before paying tax and all divided by the interest which you are paying, let's say. Okay, so that means if you have more profits for covering your interest, if you have more profits to cover your, that means your profits can cover your interest 10 times. That means your interest coverage ratio is higher, it is better. All good firms have around 10, at a rate of 10 interest coverage ratio. Their interest coverage ratio is around 10. Okay, average is around 2.53. So lower means your profits are so less that you can't cover your interests. Understood. Now tell me the answer. I'm covering the question. Which one should be eliminated first? Third one, finish. Third has to be eliminated. So any ratios means surrounding ratios you should read. Already this will not come. Already asked, no. Okay, so 3 is gone. So it will indicate both present risk as well as the emerging risk of the firm. So the banks have to check them properly before giving the loans, etc. Okay, so this is already asked, Basel 3. So they can ask something with respect to NPA or capital adequacy ratio or percentage or any trend and all. So that should be, this is an easy question, you know. Answer should be what? Second one? Okay, so already asked. This is not decided by bank. RBI, 9 plus 2.5, 11.5, all that. Okay, who's deciding? Okay, so this is the amount that banks have to maintain in the form of their own funds, tier 1, tier 2, all that. Okay, so second statement is wrong. Is that clear? Okay. This is public sector, governments of... this I think is a difficult question. That time it was a trend-based question. So this is basically that time's economic survey. Public sector banks by the government has steadily increased. This is a trend, it's a difficult question. In 16, you have to see last 5 years, how it is wrong actually. It's a difficult question, you can't tackle it now. So capital infusion has decreased or increased. Okay, just think what would have happened with respect to capital infusion by government now. Okay, you can think about that. So presently, if the same question comes up, you think on that. I'm not going to answer it now. If the same question comes up now, what would have happened with respect to capital infusion into the public sector banks in the last 5 years? It depends on the NPAs. If our capital adequacy ratio is good and everything is fine, government need not infuse more capital into the banks. As simple as that. Now you can use that logic and get to the answer. Are you able to follow? I told you this was already asked. Intercreditor agreement signed by Indian banks and financial. So it is all related to NPA. Now they will not ask. Now there can be a question on IBC related aspect. So this they will not ask because this was famous that time. Intercreditor agreements, etc. Project Shashakt was there. Intercreditor agreements were there. Okay, 5/25. All that was there that 5 years back. Okay, so this is something related to banking. So once you see this, probably you should be in a position to check like what kind of questions can come. This is not related to our discussion. One question I wanted to ask you. This masala bond is asked, so there can be other bonds which are in use that can be asked, tier 1, etc., 81, etc. So this I'm not asking. Last question is this. This was already asked, I mentioned. Bond yields are influenced by. And you will remember all of the above when we have discussed this. Inverted bond yields decide what recession is about to come. Okay, so that is what you will get. And this is what I was talking about, that question which I was mentioning, old questions. Okay, foreign currency, which is part of FDI, etc. Already asked. Last question. Done. This is the last question. We'll stop here. The last question, if you are there. Use some logic and tell me. You need not know everything to answer questions, no? As there is an option to exchange the bond for equity. 81 bonds also have this. You can convert it to equity. Okay. Bonds for equity. Convertible bonds pay a lower rate of interest. Do you think it should be okay? Yes. Why? Because you can convert it into equity, no? So you need not offer higher interest to motivate them. Are you able to get my point? Okay, so since you can convert it, no, that option is there. No, you can convert it. So that should be a positive thing. Yes, obviously, it should be true. You should use that logic. You can't convert means you have to depend on interest only. Okay, then see, the option to convert to equity affords the bond holder a degree of indexation to rising consumer prices. English. It's English now. Now see here. What is the impact of inflation on bond holders? No, you don't give me other answers. You just tell me positive or negative. Impact of inflation on bond holders. Bond holder means creditor or debtor? Creditor. Suppose I am issuing bonds, you are buying. Okay, so I am borrowing money from all of you. So you are the creditor or you are the bond holder. Okay, I am paying you 5 rupees interest on each bond. Okay, and that time inflation is 3%. Okay, inflation became 6 and still I am paying you the same 5 rupees. Means you as creditor or bond holder, you are losing. Are you able to get this? This question was also already asked, 2012. Are you able to get this? Okay, now inflation will pull away profits or money from the creditor to the debtor. Inflation will take away money from you to me, creditor to the debtor. So if you index that inflation, index the interest rates to inflation, as and when inflation is increasing, if your interest rate is also increasing, it is good. That is called as inflation indexed bonds. You are indexing it to inflation, so that threat is not there. At least if you are giving them the chance to convert it to equity, because that interest which he is getting is not okay. So if he is able to convert it into equity, at least that's okay, that he'll be able to handle that risk which is related to inflation. I think you're getting my point. Okay. So if that is clear, then what should be the answer? The option to convert to equity affords the bond holders degree of indexation to rising consumer prices. True. English. You are linking it is giving some positive thing there. Is that okay? Okay. So both are okay, I think. I'll stop here. Thank you.